So don't be fooled. Don't let anyone tell you, no, this land belonged to those people. They are not Middle Eastern. You can actually look at them and you can tell. And this is the reason why I've said it in the past and I'm repeating it now, that it is prohibited for an Israeli to actually have a DNA test in Israel. A DNA test, an ancestral DNA test to discover who your ancestors were. And those who did it outside of Israel, they found that they were not connected to that place in any way, shape or form. And this is a fact. There were people who argued with me the last time I said it, and they went back to check it, and it is true. May Allah Almighty protect us.
I don't believe that it can really clearly identify what nation you're from.
No, DNA test can't. It
can
cannot.
identify whether you have certain genetic traits that might be from North America, like Canada, or it might be from South America as well, right?
Right. Yeah. So if you really want to learn about your history and heritage, you have to do that genealogical research. And
so you've got 2 parents, you have 4 grandparents, you have 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great-grandparents, and it adds up fast. It adds up so fast, in fact, that if you go back 20 generations, you've got over 1 million grandparents.
1,048,576 to be exact. And in each generation.
So my oldest half-sibling is 61 and the youngest is 39.
These half-siblings.
Good to meet you.
Good
How
to
are
meet
you?
Good.
Meeting for the first time face-to-face.
Overwhelming.
A lot.
Yeah.
Summer McKesson and Jim Harris never understood why they towered over others and their family, both standing above 6 feet.
Growing up, would always joke that I was adopted because I was so much taller than my family and just looked different.
My father who raised me was 5'8".
Summer also had life-threatening health issues that no one else in her family had. Puzzled, they turned to 23andMe.
23andMe was kind of a last resort. Back in 2020, I found out that I had blood clots in my heart and lungs. A year later, I had to have open heart surgery.
Summer learned her life-altering medical issues are genetic.
I did it to see if it would give me any health insights.
Their parents sought help to conceive at the prestigious fertility clinic at Duke University.
I went through Ancestry and 23andMe and matched with what turned out to be the doctor at Duke's biological raised daughter and talked to her.
Back then, they couldn't freeze sperm, so it had to be fresh.
It was going to be from a Duke medical student, but it was the sperm from the doctor that ended up being my genetic father.
Summer and Jim have now connected with more than a dozen half-siblings whose paternal side connects back to that Duke doctor who passed away years ago.
And I know I wouldn't be here without him, but I also will forever be impacted by his actions.
You're not asking for money, you're asking for knowledge.
I'm asking for transparency.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Today's message is Shield of Edom. Everybody say Shield of Edom.
Shield of Edom.
Now this is coming from actually the term Rothschild, and we're going to talk about that today. We've kind of been on a series after the Epstein files release on Epstein and the end times and the synagogue of Satan. And this is a continuation of that series where we'll be discussing these connections. In fact, if you don't know this, in the Epstein emails, Epstein wrote Peter Thiel, who is the founder of Palantir, the surveillance company that's going to play a major role here in these last days. And he said, as you probably know, I represent the Rothschilds. And that's a very key piece of information, because what that means is there is a hierarchy to this synagogue of Satan and to these group of people who are serving the devil here on earth and creating a vast network, right? How is the Antichrist going to obtain control of such a large portion of the earth? Well, there's a lot of groundwork that has to be done in advance. The surname Rothschild originates from German meaning red shield. Now, most people know that, okay? Most people realize that the Rothschilds are Ashkenazis, they're German Jews, and that their last name means red shield. They've been around for a long time. They played a major role in the facilitation and founding of the current modern state of Israel. And we're going to talk about that today. But here's the part that people don't know, and we're going to make a lot of connections. So today's sermon is really going to cover not just the Rothschild family, but this long-term connection from Edom all the way to the Antichrist in the last days. And I want you guys to see these key connections. When it's translated into Hebrew, based on its etymological meaning, it corresponds to Magen Edom. Okay, what do I mean by that? The term Rothschild, that family name, means Magen Edom in Hebrew. Now, some people say it means red shield in Hebrew as well. Well, the problem with that is that the word for red and the word for Edom in Hebrew is the exact same word, okay? The exact same word. And so Magen Edom would be translated into English, shield of Edom, or the shield of the Edomites. And so the Rothschild family are the shield of the Edomites.
Well, I want to tell you a story of a guy, interesting guy. His name is Amschel Moses Bauer, okay? In 1743, a goldsmith named Amschel Moses Bauer opened a coin shop in Frankfurt, Germany. He hung over his door a sign depicting a Roman eagle on a red shield. The shop became known as the Red Shield Firm. That became his logo, okay? Amschel Bauer had a son who turned out to be a very, very bright, resourceful young man. Meyer Amschel Bauer, at a very early age, he showed that he possessed immense intellectual ability, and his father spent much of his time teaching him everything he could about money lending, business, and the basic dynamics of finance, okay? A few years later, after his father's death in 1755, Meyer went to work in Hanover as a clerk in a bank owned by the Oppenheimers. Meyer's superior ability was quickly recognized, and his advancement within the firm was very swift. His success allowed him the means to return to Frankfurt and to purchase the business his father had established back in 1743. You following us so far? Okay. The big red shield was still displayed over the door. So he adopts that as his symbol and changes his name to Red Shield. Now, the true significance of the red shield, his father adopted it back in from the red flag, which was the emblem of the revolutionary-minded Jews in Eastern Europe. Meyer Amschel Bauer changed his name to Rothschild. Not Rothschild, that's mispronounced by most Americans. Rothschild. That's the German word for red shield. Rothschild. At this point, the house of Rothschild became into being. And many of you know the story. Through his experience with the Oppenheimers, Meyer learned that loaning money to governments and kings was much more profitable than loaning to private individuals. Not only were the loans bigger, but they were secured by the nation's taxes. And so that led, of course, to the house of Rothschild. And he had 5 sons. Now, he has 5 sons: Amschel, Solomon, Nathan, Carl, and Yaakov. And they are all very, very bright and very well trained. Meyer spent the rest of his life instructing them all in the secret techniques of money creation and manipulation. As they became of age, he sent them to the major capitals of Europe to open branch offices of the family banking business. Each one went to a major city. Okay? Amschel stayed in Frankfurt. Solomon was sent to Vienna. Nathan went to London. Carl went to Naples. And Yaakov went to Paris. So the family now had a network. In 1838, Nathan made the following statement, very interesting. Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws. And the saga continues, of course, with involvements with Adam Weishaupt, who forms an occult group called the Illuminati. And that leads ultimately to the secret meetings on Jekyll Island, Georgia, which established the Federal Reserve. And that's a path that you can Google and chase down on your own as you go. Now, let's get back to our little theme.
His real name was Karl Heinrich Mordecai Marx. The father of Karl Marx was Herschel Mordecai, who was the son of Rabbi Mordecai Marx Levi, who was the son of Samuel ben Mordecai Ha Levi, who was the son of Laius ben Mordecai, who in the 1400s, Laius Mordecai changed his name from Mordecai to Schwab. So the Schwab bloodline today is the bloodline of Karl Marx. But wait, there's more. Laius ben Mordecai Schwab was the son of Samuel Leopold Schwab II, who had changed his name from Guntberger to Schwab in the 1500s. And he was the son of Samuel Guntberger, who changed his name from Bauer to Guntberger. And the Bauer bloodline was originally named the Bacharachs during the time of Christ. The Bacharachs in 1501 changed their name to Bauer, and then 76 years later, in 1577, they changed their name to Rothschild. So they're all related.
I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahabushai, Bahashem, Rachakudash. I want to give double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, because those are the men who I learned the truth from through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahabushai. Yahweh is the true name of the God of Israel. Yahabushai is who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, but his one and only true name is Yahabushai. And pretty much in this video, we're going to be talking about the so-called white man in sea line being the true descendants of Esau, whose name was changed to Edom. And as you can see on the screen right here, they're not white. We're going to also read about where does that concept of being labeled white come from, as well as the Ashkenazi Jew lie, all right? Because when you read in the scriptures, you can't be two sea lines at once. You can't be two nationalities at once. Why? Because every single human being on the planet Earth is a descendant of Noah's 3 sons and Noah himself. And each one of those sons carry a seed, all right? So every human being on the planet Earth is the seed of a man walking around. And their nationality is determined by the seed that they come from on their father's line. Because women, they don't carry seed. So they're not the progenitor of life. They give birth to a man's seed, but the man is the one that puts his seed in that woman. And she nurtures that seed for 9 months, technically, because the first month, according to the scriptures, as soon as she finds out she's pregnant, technically that's the first month. That's why when you read in Wisdom of Solomon, the 7th chapter, it mentions 10 months, all right? But today, people say 9. But anyways, so she nurtures the seed for 9 months and then gives birth to that man's seed, all right? So that's all throughout the scriptures. We read about the Levitical priesthood in Numbers, the 18th chapter. In order for you to be a priest, you have to have a record of your fathers, that you were descendant of Aaron, all right, of the sons of Levi. Then when you read Matthew, the 1st chapter, Yahabushai's genealogy, and names men. Why? Because those men carry that particular seed, which could be traced all the way back to Judah, making Yahabushai fulfill prophecy, being a Judite, all right? So when you read in the scriptures, anytime it talks about, a descendant of somebody, like Genesis, the 10th chapter, is naming nothing but men. because men carry that seed. All right? Even though you may have different tribes that come out of that seed, they're related according to what? The seed. All right? So let's read this. So I typed in on Google, nationality in the Bible based off father, right? A overview. It says in the Old Testament, nationality and tribal affiliation were primarily determined by the father's lineage, with families, tribes, and nations traced through patrilineal descent, right? This structure is evident in biblical genealogies, which often list ancestors as the house of their fathers. For instance, children of an Israelite father and a non-Israelite mother, it says like Joseph's, were considered part of their father's tribe. Let's go down here. It says key points regarding biblical nationality based on the father. It says patrilineal heritage. It says pedigree was officially declared by the house of their fathers, meaning by the seed of that particular man. The word seed in the Greek, or the word seed, goes back to the Greek word sperma, which means seed. All right, man carried the seed is the sperm. It says, yes, that's pretty much it. All right. That's the point. So now, let's read this before we get into Esau-Edom. So this concept of being called a white man, this is something that's new. This is something that's modern, that just came about a couple of hundred years ago. You're going to notice, according to the scriptures, every nation, every single human being on the planet Earth has a biblical nationality, meaning the seed that they come from, right? So this is the individual that came up with this concept of being called white or yellow or brown or black or red, right? Johann Friedrich Blumenbach from 1752 to 1840 classified humans into 5, it says 18th century racial categories based on skull measurements and skin color, on the natural varieties of mankind. That was written in 1795 or done in 1795. These groups were Caucasian white, Mongolian yellow, Malayan brown, Ethiopian black, and American red. Like that concept where they call the American Indians red, that comes from this guy. And the American Indians, they were copper tone skin, meaning that they were brown. Some of them were dark brown, some of them was light brown, some of them was in between, but they was all shades of brown. All right? So this is where this concept comes from. So now, let's read this. Now let's get into the establishment of the Jewish state, the Zionist created state of Israel. All right? Let's get into it. So I typed in on Google, Theodore Herzl, I spelled his name wrong, but Theodore Herzl dream to establish Jewish state. It says Theodore Herzl, right? Guess I spelled it right. It says from 1860 to 1904 was a visionary journalist who transformed Zionism into a political movement, dreaming of an independent Jewish state to escape rampant European anti-Semitism, right? It says his 1896 pamphlet, right, The State of the Jews, argued that Jews were a nation that needed its own territory, ideally Palestine, to ensure survival. So I'm going to show you how this man's dream became reality after his death through the Balfour Declaration, through biblical prophecy, written in Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 5. All right? So that's pretty much it. It says the vision, meaning his vision. He envisioned a modern, enlightened, and peaceful Jewish state, sometimes described as a mini Switzerland in the Middle East. All right? So there you go. It says his legacy, although he died 44 years before its creation, his dream was realized with the establishment of Israel in 1948. There you go. So let's hop into it. This is Ezekiel chapter 36, and I'm getting to the point in verse 5. It says, therefore thus saith the Lord God through Ezekiel, right? Because when you read in the scriptures, the prophets are the messengers, and they speak according to whatever Yahweh and Yahweh sanctions. Ultimately Yahweh, right? It says, surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the heathen, and against all Idumea. Idumea is the Greek way of saying Edom. Because when you read in the scriptures, Yahweh calls them referring to Edomites, red. Alright? Because the blood shows forth through their skin. Going back really to the curse of Cain. It says in the Bible, not white. Because if you tell an Edomite, like for an example, look at the background, it's white. This creature or this Edomite child that you see on the screen, he's red. This is how they look. That's why they have the term redneck, right? It says other names used. Edom, Edomites, Idumea, Idumeans, red dragon, eagle, the wicked, Rome, Grecians, which that's his whole story in itself. How the Edomites, they kicked the original descendants of Europe, which is the Indo-Europeans, right? The people of the South Pacific Islands, known as the Sea People, who were they according to the scriptures? The descendants of Japhet. And when you read Genesis 9:27, the Lord gave Japhet a lot of land. All right, he gave them all of Europe and the South Pacific Islands, all right, the Caspian Sea. So continuing on, it says, so the Greeks under Alexander the Great, even before him, his father Philip II, known as Philip of Macedon, they kicked the original Greeks out, which would be, the Etruscans, the different tribes of Japhet. And I recently just did a video on that, you should check it out. It says, so that's how they became known as European, because they kicked the original inhabitants of Europe, which is the descendants of Japhet, out of their land. Because they didn't want to conform to Hellenism, Hellenization. So it says the wicked, Rome/Grecians, the beast, serpent/devil. All right. So it says against all Idumea, meaning the whole sea line of Edom, which have appointed my land into their possession. This didn't happen back then. This happened in the future. This happened in 1948 through the Balfour Declaration, which this was Theodore Herzl's dream to establish a Jewish estate. All right. He died 44 years before he could actually see his vision come to pass, which was prophecy anyway. So it says, which have appointed my land into their possession with the joy of all their heart, with the spiteful minds to cast it out for a prey. So that's what they do with the land of Israel, right? It ain't just them. You got the Palestinians there, the Philistine Jews. You got a lot of heathen that's in the land. It's all end-time prophecy. It's written in Joel, the 3rd chapter and verse 2, all right? How they parted the Lord's land. It's all end-time prophecy. So now let's read that in the NLT version, right? The NLT says, this is what the sovereign Lord says for Ezekiel 36:5 NLT. My jealous anger burns against these nations, the 17 heathen nations, especially Edom, because they have shown utter contempt for me by gleefully taking my land for themselves as plunder. All right? And when they took it as plunder, this is what they said in verses 1 through 4. Verse 2, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because the enemy have said against you, meaning the land of Israel, aha, even the ancient high places are ours in possession. Let's read that in the NLT and continue down. Ezekiel 36:2 NLT, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Your enemies have taunted you, saying, aha, now the ancient heights belong to us. This is why you see, come to Israel, vacation commercials, come to Jerusalem. Hey, we have the bones and ancient relics and artifacts, of the ancient Israelites, King David, remnant of particular temples, or, you got Gethsemane, all that is what? A tourist attraction now. So they're saying, aha, now the ancient heights belong to us. Therefore, Son of Man, give the mountains of Israel this message from the sovereign Lord. Your enemies have attacked you from all directions, making you the property of many nations. Right? I want to read that in the KJV now. Ezekiel 36:3, it says, therefore prophesy and say, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because they have made you desolate and swallowed you up on every side, that ye might be a possession unto the residue of the heathen. So the real Israelites, they don't control that land. See, you had a group of Israelites under Ben Amin, which he passed away, but under, him being wrong and going to the land, because what was prophesied when he read Isaiah 14:1 and throughout the whole Old and New Testament, that the Messiah is going to bring us back to our land. All right, we don't got to get a plane ticket. It's prophesied that Yahushua said what? Through the will of the Most High, in Zephaniah 3:8, to wait upon him for him to rise up to the prey. Because what's prophesied to happen, a war in heaven, right, which is going to take place when Yahushua comes back. He's going to take them out of rulership, and he's going to establish the elect of the nation of Israel, and through the elect, the whole seed line of Israel as a nation. All right? So Yahushua is physically going to bring us back to our land, according to Bible prophecy. So that's not smart. So if you're an Israelite and you go back to the land of Israel, all right, under the prime minister that controls that land, which is the Edomites, but then, Benjamin Netanyahu, you're going to have to, against your will, according to their rules and regulations, join their military. You're going to have to fight in the war, all right? So we don't control that land. So that would be stupid. And then we under the curses of Deuteronomy chapter 28, from verses 16 through 68. So that would just be stupid. So you're not going to go back to the land and be sovereign and independent. All right. KJV, Ezekiel 36:3. Therefore prophesy and say, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because they have made you desolate and swallowed you up on every side, that ye might be a possession unto the residue of the heathen. All right. Who's the heathen? Who's the 17 heathen nations? Numbers 2 through 18. The ones that control that land, pursuant to Ezekiel 36:5, is the Edomites, number 2. All right, AHDAWAM. So let's go back. So it says, and ye are taken up in the lips of talkers, and are in infamy of the people. Therefore, ye mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Most High. Thus saith the Most High to the mountains, and to the hills, to the rivers, and to the valleys, to the desolate wastes. Talk about the whole land of Israel, and to the cities that are forsaken, which became a prey and a derision, to the residue of the heathen that are round about. Therefore thus saith the Lord Yahweh, surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the heathen, and against all Idumea, which have appointed my land into their possession with the joy of all their heart, with the spiteful minds to cast it out for a prey. All right. Now you go to, now how did they acquire the land? When did this become biblical prophecy? Here's the AI overview, right? This is how they got the land of Israel. Pursuant to Ezekiel 36:5, it says, the 1917 Balfour Declaration was a 67-word letter from British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to Lord Walter Rothschild, expressing support for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, which goes back to Theodore Herzl as well, because that was his vision, right? It says it was a pivotal, intentional, ambiguous document during World War I, aiming to secure Jewish support while promising to protect existing Arab rights. All right? Key aspects of the Balfour Declaration. Issued on November 2nd, 1917, during World War I, to secure wartime support, bolster Zionist aims, and protect British imperial interests near the Suez Canal. The promise: Britain committed to facilitating a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine then an Ottoman region with a small, largely Arab population. All right. It says ambiguity and contradictions. Okay, I don't care about that. So that's the point. So now let's read this. So I typed in Alto Balfour Zionism. All right. It says the 1917 Balfour Declaration was a pivotal British pledge. Okay, I think I read this already. I mean, that's the point. That's the point. Y'all get the point. All right. It was a Zionist project. There you go. And this whole biblical prophecy pursuant to Ezekiel 36:5. So now we can read this. So this is the AI overview for Ezekiel 36:5. Declares the Most High's burning jealousy against nations, specifically Edom, because it names them as Idumea, that joyfully seize Israel's land, right, through the Balfour Declaration, as plunder while mocking its desolation. It highlights the Most High's anger at how foreign nations, right, meaning the heathen nations, treated the mountains of Israel, and sets the stage for promises to restore the land and people. So that means that what? If you got to restore something, that means that the people ain't in there, right? Key points from Ezekiel 36:5 context. The Most High is speaking against the residue of the nations and all Edom. It says the offense. These nations took possession of Yahweh's land with wholehearted joy and spiteful/contemptuous minds. All right. The action. They intended to plunder the land, which was already suffering from the consequences of Israel's sins. Divine reaction. The Lord speaks in burning jealousy and fire my jealousy against them. That's in Ezekiel 36:6, which is talk about nuclear destruction in that land. All right. So there you go. So now I'm gonna just finish it off with this. 2 Thessalonians 2:8. It says, and then shall that wicked be revealed. When you go into this word wicked, that's like the Greek word play for wicked.
Strong's G 459. Animas,
right? Of the Gentiles. Okay, who's the wicked pursuant to Malachi chapter 1 and verse 4? The Edomites, all right? The so-called white man in Selah, they're known as the border wickedness when you read Malachi 1 and 4. It says, be revealed. The Greek word for revealed is apocalypto. And when you go down here, the biblical usage to uncover, lay open what has been veiled or covered up. What has been veiled and covered up? The truth of the Bible, which involves people's nationalities and judgments against their nations according to the Bible. What has been veiled or covered up? Their New World Order agenda, their true identity according to end-time prophecy, according to 2 Ezra 6 and 9. It says, disclose, make bare, to make known, make manifest, disclose what before was unknown. So who's exposing these Edomites? The prophets through the blood and sacrifice of Yahushua, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, pursuant to Luke 1 and 70, talk about his messengers, the prophets, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. That's what Yahushua is literally going to do by the way of the so-called UFOs when he comes back. All right? Now, I have forgot something. Let me type in 2 Ezra 6 verse 9. AI overview, right? Now check this out, which I'm going to read it. 2 Ezra 6 and 9. For Esau, meaning his descendants, right, Idumea, it says, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. Meaning at the end of this present age, pursuant to Daniel the 2nd chapter, the Edomites, they would be in rulership. Because what is the revived Roman Empire? What's the second beast? America. All right? And America, along with Europe, and this centralized banking system, it makes up their power structure that they have. All right? So now, I typed in 2 Ezra 6 verse 9. It's the AI overview. It says, this verse is part of a vision where the angel Uriel explains to Ezra the succession of ages, using the twins Jacob and Esau and They're zygotic, fraternal twins, meaning 2 of Isaac's sperms fertilized 2 of Rebekah's eggs. And that's why the Lord said 2 nations are in thy womb. All right, the Lord, he can do that. It says, using the twins, Jacob and Esau, to symbolize the end of the current age and the beginning of the next. It says, key points regarding 2nd Ezra 6 and 9 include symbolism. Esau represents the end of the present age, while Jacob represents the new beginning of the new age, which represents the kingdom of heaven, right? It says, the verse answers Ezra's question about what separates the times, referring back to the birth of the twins, where Jacob held Esau's heel. The interpretation, the passage emphasizes that there is no space between the end of one era and the beginning of the next. Let's go down here. Yes, that's pretty much it. Lord willing, you was edified by the lesson. Shalom.